right, so Jacob, I want to start with this little story here. I grew up in Miami, and one of my friends in high school, he was very avid about this guy he knew from another high school that played baseball. And I'm telling you, this guy would talk about him every single day in science class. And long story short, this guy ends up being Manny Machado. And we had this like, oh crap, like you knew Manny Machado, you saw the potential in him, whatever. For myself at that time, I kind of looked at it as like everyone is Manny Machado. And once you make it, you're raking in hundreds of millions of dollars. Reading your story, I saw you got drafted at 18. You made a decent amount of money at that time, but you talk about the reality of going to the minor leagues and Lakeland and that experience. Can you talk to me a little bit about that time in the minors that first year when you get signed?
Yeah, I think I would think about it like twofold. One, I think something most people don't quite understand about professional sports, particularly, is the age at which you're coming into this. So for me, I was 18, but whether you get drafted in high school or out of college, you're 18 to 21. So you're not really like mature from an adult perspective, but you're getting thrust into this environment where you are expected to be a professional and you have the spotlight on you in a lot of senses. So I think people have to understand that side of it. And then the other side is that financial component of it. No matter what you sign for, you're probably going to end up getting somewhere around 50% of it, give or take, depending on what the taxes are going to be. You're going to pay roughly 5% to your agent. And you got to treat that money like this could be the last big money that I ever make from playing that sport. Because even if you look at any league, right? You look at the NFL, you look at the NBA, you look at Major League Baseball, the hit rates on guys actually getting to the next contract, the Manny Machado contract where he signs for hundreds of millions of dollars, it is so low, even for the guys that are getting drafted highest. So
Mhm.
much from a fan perspective is understanding that you're coming into this as an 18 to 21-year-old. You're trying to figure out life while you're trying to figure out professional sports. And then from the financial side of it, you have to be treating every dollar like it could be the last, even if you sign for 10 million bucks or more in the draft.
Mhm. And you talked about spotlight and just like trying to be savvy with that. When you first sign, what's like actually going through your mind when you're like 18 years old? Your agent's calling you, thinking like, "Hey, the Tigers or might sign you," or you said something along the lines that you weren't even sure if you were going to get drafted. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, well, with Major League Baseball, you could be the best player in the draft, arguably, and you still might not know where you're going to go in the draft just based on, at the time, how the slotting system worked and how teams could draft you. So that was an important component as I was going through that process. When I think about the draft as a whole, and when I think about players getting drafted, there's so much behind the scenes that people don't quite understand. And on one side, it is arguably one of the greatest memories I have from all professional sports. Like I remember running across the room, gave my dad a big hug, said we did it. This is somebody who coached me from the time I was, I don't know, old enough to walk and think about throwing a baseball or hitting a baseball. But then on the other side, you get drafted. It feels surreal, like really surreal, especially when you realize what you're going to sign for. I mean, I had like $1,000 in my bank account, I think. I'm like, man, I got like millions of dollars for signing this piece of paper. But then on the flip side of it, 2 days later, you're in this locker room where like the spotlight is on you. You're the guy. You're the first round pick. Everybody's like, all right, like what do you got? And going back to what I said earlier, you're like this 18-year-old kid. So you're like, I'm trying to figure out who I am as a person, much less try to prove something to you guys.
Right. And you mentioned that piece of being in the spotlight. You enter the Tigers organization. You feel like, all right, I made it to the big leagues. But then like next one day to the next, you get shipped off to Lakeland and you're in the military bunkers. Mentally, how did you feel at that moment from being like you see your dream and then it's you hit something, you're like, whoa, like where am I getting sent? And all like the emotions behind that.
It's really hard no matter how many times somebody tells you the minor leagues isn't like the big leagues, which I had a ton of people tell me that until you're actually there. Because even for me, I'm a kid from St. Louis, Missouri. I went to a really small high school. All of a sudden, I'm not just in these military bunkers in Lakeland, Florida, which Lakeland, Florida is like in the middle of Central Florida, kind of the
Yeah.
middle of nowhere, especially in the summer. Nobody's there. But on top of that, half my teammates spoke, their first language is Spanish. I'm like,
Right.
I don't speak any Spanish. And culturally, like what was normal to them was not normal to me, and what was normal to me was not normal to them. So there's all these other aspects of the game now that you're trying to figure out, much less just perform on the field.
Right. And to that point, like you entered the the minor leagues, right? There was this piece that you talked about in terms of negotiating that first contract that you actually had leverage because you had a full ride to UNC. Walk me through, I guess, like the typical negotiation for someone that's about to sign to the bigs. Because you had leverage. You said, look, if I don't get the contract, I have a really good education right here. I could go study, accounting, whatever have be. So walk me through a little bit about that.
Well, if I've learned anything about negotiating, whether it's in sports or in business or in life in general, is you better be able to put your cards on the table and feel like you're going to win the hand if they call your bluff. So if you're going to bluff, you better make sure at some point you have the cards. For me, those cards was I had this guaranteed full ride scholarship to the University of North Carolina, a great school, a great baseball program, something that I was fully committed to doing. So when they offered me, millions of dollars, and I remember going to bed the night before the signing deadline. So we're 24 hours prior to like, I got to make a decision or I'm going to go to school. They offer me a life-changing amount of money, enough money that like I got this pit in my stomach saying we're not going to take this. But my dad was confident, like, hey, this wasn't our number. We think you're worth more. Like, all right. As an 18-year-old, I'm not sure you can quite understand that. Like even looking back now as a 35-year-old, I'm like, man, that was pretty risky. But at the end of the day, like I had the cards to say, like, I got this great opportunity on the other side of the table. So that that lesson right there in those 24 hours, I mean, I ended up making almost $2 million more because I turned that contract down, was one that certainly stuck with me. And not so much because like I quote unquote like won the negotiation or I got more money, but it taught me the value in having leverage. And ultimately, like a lot of leverage is storytelling, right? Like how can you craft a story in a way that somebody else on the other side of the table, whether it's poker or real life, believes that you have the cards.
Yeah, yeah. I was reading your story and I was like, dude, it's pretty ballsy to kind of go into negotiation saying that. I was like, so you were 100% like guaranteed saying if I didn't get that money, you were just gonna go to school, even though you were such a I don't know, like you were like a top 10 prospect. I find it like hard to believe that you would just go to school instead of going to the bigs, or you were thinking I'm gonna go to UNC and then try to go to the MLB. Like, what was your logic there?
Yeah, so with baseball, if I would have turned down that contract and gone to North Carolina, I could have gotten drafted again in 3 years. So after my
Okay.
junior season. So my thought was my goal, while certainly to get drafted, was ultimately to play in the big leagues as long as possible. And if you look at the numbers behind it, you actually have a better chance of having a longer big league career coming out of college than you do getting drafted to high school. So while it was certainly a lot of money, there was a lot of other factors into it. But I also think part of it was this entire lead up to the draft for me was I was constantly telling teams that like my plan A was to go to the University of North Carolina. And then even
Right.
going into the high school season, I had like a pretty down first couple starts. So I remember after like the second or third start, I gave up a couple runs, wasn't throwing super hard. I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to go to school and like I'll get 3 years to continue to get better and hone my craft and come out after that. And then it was like right after that, I start like have this snowball effect of like basically pitch as good as I could possibly pitch through the rest of the season. And then that led to like having this big decision to be able to make.
Got it. In high school, I had a lot of friends that played baseball, and I'm always curious because I had some of them that were pitchers. So I was a little tapped in. I had one friend that he actually got drafted, I think, by the Tigers as well. He played for, what was it that made you a top 10? Were you throwing like over 100? Is that like the prereq to get to high draft pick?
Yeah, look, I think now it's a little bit flawed because I think every high school, I think this year we've had almost a dozen high school pitchers that I think have hit 100 miles an hour or more. But in 2008, or 2009, when I was a senior in high school, I hit 98, which at the time was pretty hard. But at the same time, I could really pitch for a high schooler, so I was pretty polished in
Mhm.
terms of throwing breaking balls for strikes, not walking guys, having pretty polished mechanics. From a personality and attitude standpoint, was pretty mature for my age. So that in conversion with a team that had a high pick, they liked me. Like we talked about earlier, I had some leverage. It was a bit of the perfect storm of a lot of things coming together for me to get picked where I did.
Got it. All right. So you were throwing heat. You were very mature for your age. You entered the minor leagues, and now you have decent amount of money for anyone at that age. Did that affect you in any way in terms of like, dude, I'm rich, or are you going and spending that money? Like, what's your logic when you first get this cash?
Yeah, well, I'll frame up how I think about this as we help athletes today because I see a lot with all the guys we work with is you fall into one end of the spectrum. On one side, you're like, I am rich and I could spend every last dollar and like this money's never going to go out because I got millions of dollars. Or you're on this side and you're like, I got a lot of anxiety that like I'm going to be the next guy on 30 for 30 broke. So like, are you sure I can buy that? Are you sure I can buy that? Should I spend that much money? I certainly fell into the latter category where I was I wouldn't even call it prudent with the money, just like so frugal to a fault because I was so afraid that like, oh well, if I spend it all, I'm not going to have this opportunity set again. And I had good enough people around me that had taught me the power of compounding. And I'm like, all right, if I'm doing the math on this, I make 8% a year, and
Right.
the money doubles, every 9 years. All of a sudden, I'm like, wow, this could really turn into something incredible if I'm just not stupid with it on the upfront.
Right. And with that being said, is there anything like in hindsight you would do differently? I think one of your parents was an accountant, correct? Is there anything that you would have done differently? Because I hear your story and it kind of resonates with myself. Obviously, I didn't enter the MLB, but my first job, I was living at home and I wouldn't spend my money. I would spend it like on Subway every 2 weeks, and I would be like, dang, I can't be eating out this much. Is there anything that you would change in your opinion?
I would have taken a little bit more onus on myself to
Mhm.
understand the people that I was putting around me at the time. A lot of it I kind of pushed to my parents or agent. And I just didn't, a lot of the questions that I personally wanted to ask, I wasn't asking because I was afraid of feeling silly by asking them, but I had no understanding of anything that was going on. So it was just kind of like, hey, like if you think I should go left, I'll go left.
Mhm. And with that being said, in terms of finances, like we already talked about in your experience in the minors a little bit, living in those military dorms, etc. How long did it take for you to, I guess, get to the bigs and feel like, I guess you effectively made it? Because like you made the money, you signed the contract, but I'm sure as anyone, you go from like thinking you're gonna be like the main pitcher on the team to now you're playing in these games. You talked about this moment where you're flying to New Mexico on a layover flight, someone's hitting dingers off you, and you're in your bunker like, yo, what the hell am I doing? Like, how long did it take you to get to the bigs? Walk me through. Like, I really want to tap into that, all that emotion and everything.
So I got to the big leagues pretty fast. I mean, I got drafted at 18. I was in the big leagues by the time I was 20. So about a year and a half in the minor leagues. But I think arguably more valuable to the conversation is what happened after that. So I get to the big leagues and I just think that like time is going to do its thing. Like, hey, dude, I'm going to be here for the next 10 years.
Right.
And it wasn't that I wasn't working hard, but I didn't have the proper level of fear that it could all go away tomorrow. And I think there's something to be said for that, like in life in general. It's something that helps me a lot today is like I have this insatiable drive that like everything that I built could all go away tomorrow if I don't keep my foot on the gas. Because in pro sports, there's this line that we use a lot in baseball. It's a lot easier to get to the big leagues than it is to stay in the big leagues. And I heard it in the minor leagues, but I didn't really think much of it until I got to the big leagues. And then I realized pretty quickly I was back in AAA because like every day that you're in the big leagues, even if you're a guy on a guaranteed contract, you are earning your right to be there. You're simply renting your space in the locker room. You can look at multiple teams that have cut guys that have been guaranteed 10, 20, 30, 40 million dollars. So they're literally paying them tens of millions of dollars not to play for the team because every day you got to earn the right to be on that team. And professional sports is probably not like any other normal job in terms of like there's no performance improvement plan. Like if you're not doing good that day, you're just out and somebody else is in.
That first piece you said was super spot on. And I think this applies to business as well. And I could give you one example. When I was in college, I had a drop shipping business where I was selling bucket hats in Australia and New Zealand, and it was doing fairly decent. And I remember thinking at like 18, I was like, dude, I figured it out. Like my life is set. I could do this till I'm 70 years old. Right. Which is, it's hilarious in hindsight, but it's true. Like we always think, oh, we're going to consistently be making X amount of dollars for the rest of our lifetime. You also touch up on something important of you enter the big leagues, you're in this locker room, and the dynamic is absolutely insane versus like a traditional guy like myself. If I'm working with analysts, we're all typically making the same amount of money. But you could have your locker right next to freaking Manny Machado, and the discrepancy in how much you're making is different. Did you struggle with that in any way of kind of playing the keeping up with Derek Jeters of the world, where you're like looking at, oh, I bought this new Mercedes or G Wagon, whatever, have it?
Yes, in a sense, and no in a different sense. No, in the sense that like I never felt like it was like keeping up with the Joneses. But if you ever seen the movie The Italian Job, in The Italian Job, they steal a bunch of gold bricks and everybody's got like a cool idea. Like one guy's like, dude, I'm going to build this cool house in Spain on this vineyard. One guy's going to build this incredible sound system. One guy's into cars. And one guy's like, I don't know what I want to do. I guess I'll just take one of whatever you guys are going to do. And he's the one that ends up stealing everybody's gold bricks. And I think even outside of keeping up with the Joneses, you realize really quickly that like whatever you are prioritizing can get faded and jaded so fast by what everybody else is prioritizing. Example, like, well, somebody else bought this watch. So like now I feel like I got to go out and buy a watch. Or somebody else bought a cool car. So like, man, like the car that I have, like, is that like actually like, is that like nice enough to have in the parking lot now? So I think you're always battling that. And it's this weird concept where like if you were the newest employee at a business and you were talking to the C-suite at a Fortune 500 company, but every interaction you had was with the C-suite. You're like, I'm making 60 grand a year. Like I'm the lowest man on the totem pole. This person's making millions of dollars and has stock options, but we're like sitting next to each other at lunch. And then like when we walk out to the parking lot, we're doing that together. And then maybe we're going to dinner together too. And you're like, all right, but we're all on the same team. Like I want to get like, can I do what they're doing? And the reality is like you can't. But
Right.
oftentimes players think you can.
Right. Well, first note, Italian Job is an absolute classic. I had that DVD at my grandma's house, so I've seen that movie like 100 times when I was a kid. The second piece, so you said you didn't really struggle with keeping up with the Joneses, but I hear stories, and you mentioned 30 for 30 of people making these huge contracts, right? Not even people that, signed one contract and really couldn't figure it out in the league. You talk about people that make tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. What is one of the main things or a few things that they're doing wrong financially? Is it, something related to taxes or just their spending habits, not knowing how to invest? Walk me through that a little bit.
It's not having a clear outcome of what they're trying to accomplish. So if I give you the analogy of like you have this giant oak tree, and on this giant oak tree, you have all these branches that are coming off, and all the branches are all the like intricate things that you want to do. You want to give away some money, you want to help your family, you want to go on a cool vacation, you want to buy that dream car, you want to spend this amount of money. But like the oak tree, the one outcome that you're trying to create is you want flexibility when you get done playing. And the biggest mistake I see guys make is they don't continue to go back and remember like what is the oak tree I'm trying to create. And they get so distracted with the branches that what they end up doing is they plant all these other trees. And now they get done, they're like, well, I have 100 trees. None of them are as strong as the oak tree. And I don't even really care about these other ones, but like I already planted them. So I guess I should just stick with them. So whether it comes to taxes or investing or strategies or LLCs or business decisions, like there's so many little things, but it's just not coming back to focusing on like, what is the one outcome that I want to create? I have an incredible opportunity set. I'm earning money at a young age. There is nothing that you should do that should hinder your ability to have some level of financial flexibility in the future. Now, look, Manny Machado's level of financial flexibility, hopefully, is going to be different than Jacob Turner's level of financial flexibility when he's done playing. I would hope.
Right.
But the reality is, like, we both made millions of dollars playing a sport that we loved at a super young age. If you are wise with that at all, you should be able to create your version of that oak tree.
Okay. Yeah. So you talk about that analogy of the oak tree. So it's like for someone planting 100 trees, is it kind of like, oh, MLB player tries to open up a restaurant, then a nightclub, and then it's like putting hands in too many different kind of piles? Is that more so where you're
Yeah,
going for?
there's so many shiny objects around you, and you think the money's never going to end because the whole reason why you got to the big leagues in the first place is because you have an unwavering amount of self confidence, and that same self confidence is like your biggest hindrance when it comes to your money because you're like, well, dude, I was good at this, like I'm going to be good at that too. And look, even if I'm not good at it in the first couple of years, I'll be making like $100 million in the future, so like we can clean that up in the future. And the reality is like, dude, this game is harsh. And at any point, that could be the last paycheck you ever got. And then on the flip side of that, like, no, just because you were good at sports and because you have this confidence in what you're doing on the field has nothing to do with what your success is off the field. Yet you have all these people that are like, Jacob, I got the next greatest idea for you. It's
Right.
XYZ. And then the next week, somebody else has got the next greatest idea. And then the next week, your buddy bought the new car in the locker room. You're like, I need that too. And before you know it, you've totally lost focus of what you're actually trying to create.
That really hit right now, like honestly, because I could see if someone has been an absolute stud, and let's say in particular baseball, right? You're growing up, you're just better than everyone, and then you're being told, "Oh, you're going to go to the big leagues." Then you make it to the big leagues, and you're making tens of millions, of hundreds of millions. We're like, dude, I can do anything. I can manifest whatever I
Yeah.
want financially. So, Jacob, for yourself right now, right? You talked about your career in other different podcasts, so I don't, there's no need to repeat yourself. You played in a couple different teams. Talk to me about the day that you knew your MLB career was over, and you're just like have to start from square one again.
Yeah. I knew my career was over before I started the last game of my career, or at least I thought it was. I was in South Korea. We were playing against the Samsung Lions. And I remember walking off the field. I think it was in the fifth or sixth inning was my last inning. I remember walking off and being like, I think that's it. And after the season, flying back with my wife, it's like a 10-plus hour flight back from South Korea to the United States. And I remember telling her, I was like, I think I'm done. And she hadn't even really heard me like talk about it like that, but I'm a pretty analytical person. I'm like looking at my numbers and I'm like, I mean, I could maybe play again next year, but do I really want to? And I got all these other interests that are outside of baseball, and I know they're going to take time to come to fruition and start developing. And I'm excited about those things too. So maybe now is the right time to pull the plug. It turned out that the next year was COVID, so it made it a little bit easier transition because all of a sudden nobody was having a normal spring training. But in one sense, it was a freeing feeling to be like, all right, I'm like, got this next thing starting. In another sense, it was absolutely terrifying because all I had known since I was 18 was baseball. And I'm like, yeah, I got these skills, but like, it's time to somewhat like put up or shut up. Like, I'm saying I can do these other things, but like, I haven't done any of them.
Right. But what was that thing in South Korea when you're playing the Samsung lines that you're like, I'm done with baseball? Like, what was it? Was it physically? Was it just like performance wise? Like, what
Yeah.
was it exactly?
So I'll frame the story for you. So I'm in South Korea. The Korean baseball organization, which is the league I was playing in, is like the second best Asian league. I'd put it on par with like AAA ish.
Hmm.
I had a 5+ ERA in this league. The
Okay.
team was only keeping me on the team because they already paid me a guaranteed amount of money. So they're like, we'll just keep you through the end of the year. We weren't going to make the playoffs anyways. But like they're starting to pitch some of their younger prospects over me. And I'm like, all right, if I can't put up the numbers I want to put up here, what makes me think that I can put up the numbers I want to put up back in the United States? And at that time, I had already gone through like this exercise of trying to figure out like, oh, how could I strike more guys out or how could I walk less guys? Like I feel like I had turned over every stone at that point where if I was having a real honest dialogue and I was zooming out from myself and looking at myself as a player, I'm like, yeah, I don't see that guy like getting back to the big leagues and having sustained success, which at that point was really the only reason why I would keep playing. Like I'd gotten to the big leagues, I'd had, 8+ years of different time in the big leagues. I'm like, getting back to the big leagues for one more day wasn't going to do anything for me. Now, if I could get back to the big leagues and stay there and have sustained success, 100% I would want to do that.
Hmm.
But giving an honest look at where I was at from a performance standpoint, it wasn't in the cards.
Got it. And so you're talking about like on the flight back from South Korea to the States, you're telling your wife, like, look, I don't think I'm going to play baseball anymore. What is your initial kind of thought of like, what am I going to do for work? Are you thinking of being like a coach or, because obviously now you manage money as an advisor for a lot of clients right now, but what's like your first thought for work? Like, what are you going to do?
My first thought was I'm probably going to have to finish my degree, which I was in the process of doing, just because I'm like, I don't know what door is going to open, but I really want to make sure that if that door opens and I need that box checked, that I have that box checked. The very next thought is like, that is going to suck because I'm 29 years old and that's the last thing in the world that I want to do. And frankly, like I'm not a huge school guy from the standpoint of like, I don't know if this is going to teach me anything from a life standpoint that's actually going to help me other than like, it's going to help me check this box. And then the third piece is like, how much urgency should I be having? Like, should I go back and just do like a normal off season, chill for a couple months, work out, figure this out over time? Should I go back and like have my foot on the gas from day one? And I remember asking a couple of people for advice, and frankly, their advice was terrible. Like, it was just like the most generic base. I'm like, that's not helping me at all. So I think there was just like there was a level of confusion, like a lot of conflicting thoughts.
Hmm. And so in the South Korea League, you were studying like what, online? Like you
Yeah.
already were kind of like things are looking down. I'm already just like kind of setting things up right now. But what made you study? Like, because I don't know, I feel like as a casual, a civilian who's never played professional sports, you think most professional athletes when they retire, they're like, I'm not going to school. I have all this money, I can invest it in bonds or an S&P 500 index. Like, why weren't you going that route? Was it because you thought you didn't make enough money, or maybe you felt like you didn't to support a lifestyle that you wanted to achieve? Like, what was your thought process of going to school versus not going to school?
Yeah. Well, I think twofold. One, from a financial perspective, I was pretty smart with the money I made. I made, roughly $15 million in my career, saved almost every dollar of it.
Hmm.
If I said like I don't want to do anything, I could not do anything. But I'm
Hmm.
also 29 years old.
Right.
And, what I had always told my wife was like, I don't see myself like ever not working. So what do I want to go build next? And what I will tell you is like doing what I'm doing now and starting this business from a stage where in 2021, when we started, we had 2 clients to where we're at today has been more rewarding personally than anything I ever did with baseball. And I think part of that has to do with like with baseball, I had a ton of God given ability. I worked super hard for it. But look, there is a lot of serendipity involved with you becoming a professional athlete. Like, as much as I can say, like, man, I worked harder than the next guy, there was a lot of people that worked just as hard as me that didn't have the God given ability. So, like, they were never going to make it. When it comes to like what I'm doing now, yeah, I have some like inroads that other people might not have, but like, dude, I started from ground zero. Like, everybody's like, oh, he probably had a bunch of people that helped him. Nope. He probably had a bunch of people that believed in him. Nope. In fact, what I had was a bunch of people that were like, I guess Jacob like spent all his money, so like he really needs to go back and get a job. That's what I had.
Right. No, I mean you touched upon something important about like just the reality of making it to the big leagues. Like you have to have a combination of a lot of things of huge work ethic, but also that like innate ability, right? Like some people are just have it, some people don't. It doesn't, you know, discredit anything they've done, right? Like some people play Division 1, that's freaking
Yeah.
amazing, right? But now to that second piece, right? You're doing something that is fulfilling, you're helping people out. Walk me through, I guess, what got you day one into doing what you're currently doing and saying like this is what I want to do.
Day one was me reaching out to people that I thought were successful, asking them if they would do it over again. Right. Like originally I went to do investment banking. I love just like understanding how people make money, spend money, businesses. I'm like, so this business that I've never heard of is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Like, how is that possible? And who's buying them? But then I asked the guy that was like the head of a big investment bank that I had known, and I'm like, what do you think? And he's like, unless you want to work 15-hour days, 6 days a week, he's like, I wouldn't go down this path. So it started with that. And then ultimately it led to like me going to work with an individual that was local to me, essentially telling him how I would work for free because I just wanted to understand, like, do I really want to dive headfirst in this business? And then it led to having a conversation with my brother where I remember sitting across the table from him at lunch after we had just quit the roles that we were doing and him looking like ghostly white and me telling him that the sun was going to come up tomorrow, but not really understanding like, all right, like I know if we keep doing this, we'll be quote unquote, we'll figure this out in some form or fashion. I have no idea how long it's going to take because I've never done this before, but I know I'm not going to quit. So that was the impetus of kind of like what led us to where we're at today.
Amazing, yeah. I mean, it's cool seeing your logic of going into, I guess, investing in finance because I myself I studied finance. I worked in something called prime brokerage, and I feel like we all that's anyone that studies finance, we first look at investment banking because it's like, oh, obviously this is where
Yeah.
the big bucks are made. And then for myself, same thing. It was just like 100 plus hours. I was like, okay, I don't know if I'm built for that specifically. So Jacob, to kind of wrap it up and walk through your business, what do you essentially do? Are you a financial advisor, or is it something slightly different?
Yeah, so we are structured as a multifamily office, which really all that means is we're covering everything with a dollar sign. So as much as we help people with more traditional financial advisory type solutions, it's everything from like business management to concierge service to buying cars and shipping cars and getting leases and vetting real estate agents and really helping the athletes and the entrepreneurs that we work with be the trusted resource on anything with a dollar sign in front of it.
So you're like you're literally the go-to guy for everything, taxes, purchases they want to make, everything.
Everything from should I spend $200 on this hotel room to I want to buy this $200,000 piece of jewelry, where should I source it from?
Got it. And in MLB, does everyone is it how does that work like in terms of getting assigned an individual, or are you actually calling people in the bigs like players themselves, speak to their agent?
It's a little bit of a combination of everything. I would say for most athletes, they fall into like one of three buckets with groups that they choose to work with. Bucket one is like my family or my mom and dad had somebody, and I trust them and they're not going to steal my money. So, like, I'm going to go with them. Bucket two is I have an agent that really recommends a group, and I met with one group and it was them, and I'm working with them. And in bucket three is I vetted a few different groups. I had a bunch of people reach out to me, and I chose whoever I felt like was the right fit. And I would say we have clients that honestly we become the advisor for them, and we fall into each one of those three buckets where like we knew somebody, we know the agent, or we just reach out directly to the player. The hardest thing for an athlete to navigate is like, look, you're trying to vet in an area that you have no expertise. This isn't like I'm a great pitcher and I'm betting my next pitching coach. This is like I'm coming into millions of dollars. Everybody's got a good pitch, and I'm really naive and really new to this. So trust is a huge factor in all this.
Would you say that's like the number one thing?
I'd like to say that the number one thing is competency above anything else. When I
Mhm.
think about like what we do in the space we're in, there's five or six other groups that we consistently compete against that also do like really good work. Where if I put them on like a level of competency, it's like, hey man, we're all at this bar where there's really specialized advice. They have great service models. And then I think for the athlete, hopefully once they reach that level of competence, it comes down to do I like this person? Do I trust this person? And do I see myself actually wanting to work with this person? Because just because we might have a service model that fits one person better than the other person might be a better fit for them from a cultural standpoint, or might have somebody on the team that speaks Spanish really well, and Spanish is their first language. All those are like huge factors that come into this, especially with athletes.
This is all fascinating, and I don't know if this is probably outside the scope of it, but I saw that thing that happened with Otani where his agent stole a bunch of money. Is this like I guess like a common theme that happens when someone doesn't have someone maybe like watching over their financial well-being? Like this is the thing that confuses me. Like how is an agent able to steal, you know, a shit ton of money from,
Yeah.
let's say Otani?
Yeah. So, one, just to clarify, so I make sure I don't speak out of turn, the bookie stole the money, not the agent.
The book. Okay, got you, got you.
But the bookie was his interpreter, so part of his overall team. And the reason why it happens, and the reason why it sounds so insanely ridiculous to like a normie like me and you, where it's like I check my bank account, like I would know if somebody's taking hundreds of thousands of dollars out, is there's a lot of athletes that don't know the login to their financial institution, and the group that's helping them manage their money, everything's coming to them, and then they're just running point on everything that's going out. And this is one of the big lessons I try to teach every athlete is you want a service that is a done with you service, not a done for you service. What that means is they will do a lot of the things behind the scenes, but they're bringing you into the conversation with a lot of the key things that you need to understand. Because I mean, I met with athletes that have 10 years of MLB service time that couldn't log into their investment account. Like when I say, "Can you send me a statement?" They say, I've never seen the statement. I just know I can spend X amount a month."
Dude,
And
that's
that seems
crazy.
crazy. But
Yeah.
again, you go back to like you came into this money as an 18-year-old, you found people you trusted, and you've solely relied on whatever they're telling you.
Yeah, no, that seems absolutely insane. But I mean, I guess what you're saying, if they got all this money at 18 and they've been doing kind of like the same thing year after year and, they're living a normal life, they don't think twice. But I feel like that's definitely a big red flag, like you said, like to have someone just kind of tell you everything versus working with someone together. Just, I don't know, seems like the right way.
Oh,
Um,
100%.
but anyways, Jacob, so on Twitter, X platform, you're pretty big there in your platform and your audience. Talk to me a little bit about what you speak about there, so the audience has context to follow you.
Yeah, I mean, I talk a lot about ways that you can get smarter with your money. I talk a lot about business. I talk a lot about things that I care about personally in my life. I have 4 kids. I try to be a great dad to them. So whether you're looking to get smarter with your money or you want to hear about my successes, mostly my failures when it comes to professional sports, I talk about kind of everything under the spectrum there.
Amazing. And my last question is, what is one piece of financial advice you are giving to your kids right now?
They just started an investing account where they picked 2 companies that they use personally that they're excited about. And we're learning that we don't check our stocks every single day.
I love that. All right, Jacob. Well, I really appreciate your time, man. Thank you so much. Cheers.
Appreciate you.